Just a second. Just a second. All right, I'm gonna start recording and okay, the floor is yours.
Well, like I was saying, what an amazing weekend we had with all the amazing leaders. The knowledge that was put forth amongst the team. If you weren't there, and your team members need to reach out to you and talk to you about what's going on. My wife did over 60 pages of notes on her computer. She sat there and was like a scribe, and I was taking all the pictures so we can go back through it and learn again and keep refreshed of what happened over the weekend. So yeah, I am super excited about it all. The light was just glaring, but
Fielding those new leaders. And then when they were every month, that's a
sounds like somebody else is trying to get on, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
just an amazing weekend with great friends and getting to know Tyson, the new president of the company. The 25% straight across the board customer payment, everything was like, wow. So I just want to thank you, George and Adrian, for putting together these Zooms and everything that they do for us. And let's rock and roll, guys.
Thank you. Now let's introduce Karen and Colombo. We are going to have an amazing call today with them. They have an incredible experience in the industry. They have earned seven figures in company that was very much harder and pay plan. I mean, the pay plan of the past, a company that's more than seven, it's around 68 years old or something like that. But anyway, the floor is yours.
Thank you, George and Adrian. We're delighted to be here. And I just wanted to pop in and say hi. I'm so excited to listen to my husband. I listen to him a lot, but I think you'll really enjoy him today. And it's an honor to be able to share with you this morning. I'm just going to turn it over to Colombo.
Thanks, honey. And thanks, George and Adrian and all the leadership for trusting me for at least a few minutes here as I share. I told Karen I didn't want her out of the shot because I look so much better when I'm next to her because everyone assumes he can't be that bad looking. Look at her. So anyway, but we are honored to be able to share for a few minutes here, and kind of our topic is that we want to talk about here is the right time and the right place. And we believe timing is everything. When we were first introduced to this industry last week, January 19th, was our 48th anniversary of being involved in this industry. So we've been in this type of business for most of our adult life. But when we were first introduced to this, we were definitely looking. It was perfect timing for us because we were expecting our first child. This was January of 1977. The first day of that month, we bought 4 vacant buildings, and that'll play into the story here as I get into a little bit, for me to fix up so we have rental income. The 19th of that month, or the 11th of that month, we had our first child. Colombo de Salvatore III was born. The 19th of that month was was the anniversary of us signing up into our first platform, and the 20th was my birthday. I turned 26, I think. So my last birthday about 2 weeks ago was January 20th, and the best present I got was a brand new president. So my present was a president. So anyway, but the reason that I think it was perfect timing for us is because when we saw this, my goal, or the reason that we were looking, is I wanted Karen home as a full-time mother. And we, like, as I just said, we had our first child 1 week before we signed up in this industry. And the reason I believe that's perfect timing is because if we weren't pregnant, I'm going to go through what a typical day was for Karen and I. We were unbelievably busy. We both worked literally around the clock. And I'll get into the details in just a second. But If we weren't expecting a child, I don't believe I'd have seen this industry. I wasn't in the looking zone. Or if we had had the baby and now got into the routine of having some kind of daycare, and it was, say, 6 months or a year later, we would have accepted the fact that our child was going to be raised by a stranger and we wouldn't have been looking anymore. So I believe the fact that we saw and got involved in the business 1 week after we had this baby, our first child, was perfect timing for us. Now, the reason that I believe it was perfect timing is because we didn't have one extra minute. We were too busy to take on anything else. I used to work at UPS every morning at 4 o'clock. I would load the trucks before they went out and delivered the packages. At 8 o'clock, I ran to the University of Maine because I was a full-time college student. Now, I wasn't going to college to get an education because after 6 years, I was still a freshman. I was going to college because my dad was a disabled vet and they paid me to go to college. They paid for all my books, all my tuition, and they gave me a check every month. The check back then, because this is now almost 50 years ago, was only $270 a month, but that's like $1,200 or $1,500 a month now. So I was going to school because I was getting paid. And the time when I met the individual that shared this opportunity, it was during a summer class because I went to school year round. Because as long as I was taking classes, I was getting that check because my dad being a disabled vet. So I would load trucks at 4 o'clock. At 8 o'clock, I'd run to the University of Maine and I would sit into class until noon. And then I'd run to a construction site because I worked for myself. I was a drywall contractor and I'd work until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, depending on how late it stayed light. And then I would go home and chase tenants in our new acquired properties. So I put in long days every single day, literally almost around the clock, because at 4 o'clock or 3:30 the next morning, I was back shuffling packages at UPS. Karen, not only was she the bigger breadwinner of the family, but she worked more than I did. She was the head of the Department of Respiratory Therapy in our hospital. And she was there at 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night, 7 days a week. 12 hours on, 7 days a week. At 7 o'clock at night, because she was the head of the department, she was the one that went home with the beeper and the pager because she was on call from 7 o'clock at night till 7 o'clock in the morning. So she was either, and many times at 2 in the morning, she'd get a call. She'd have to run into the hospital, give a patient a treatment, come home, get a few more hours of sleep. But she was either at the hospital or on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we had a baby coming. Now, that wouldn't have been such a bad thing, but I promised her that when we started having children, she could stay home as a full-time mother. The reason that we were looking and the reason that we were in the looking zone is because when we found out we had a baby coming and she was bringing in probably 60% of our income, I had a dilemma. And I didn't even really think about trying to convince her that she shouldn't stay home. We both agreed that we wanted her home as a full-time mother, and we were going to figure that out. And like I said, I didn't even see the business until 1 week before before we had our first child. But the whole time of that pregnancy, the one consuming thought I had was, how am I going to figure this out so she can stay home as a full-time mother when we have this baby? So I was definitely in the looking zone. Now, I met the person that shared this opportunity with us in a class. And like I said, the timing is everything. If I was not taking the summer class at the University of Maine, I never would have met the gentleman that sat next to me in a class that opened the door of opportunity to this industry. It was a summer class, and we had 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for this course. And in 3 weeks, it covered the whole semester. So after 2 hours in the class, the professor said, take 10 minutes, go to the bathroom, get a coffee, whatever. So this gentleman, our original sponsor, and I would stand out in the hallway and sip a cup of coffee. And wouldn't you know it, he knew what my favorite subject was. And he talked to me all the time about my favorite subject because my favorite subject was me. And he would ask me, Who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? What do you like? What would you do if you had all kinds of money? He just had all the right questions. And in just a couple weeks of taking a 5 or 10 minute break, he found out everything he needed to know to open this door of opportunity. The thing he found out was that we were expecting a child and we wanted Karen to be home as a full-time mother. We had about 2 days of classes left. And on this 10-minute coffee break, he said to me, because he waited till the very end of the classes, he said, Colombo, how about if I showed you a way that you could solve this problem? And I said, the problem of me wanting to replace Karen's income so she can stay home as a full-time mother? He says, yeah. He says, I'm working on a project and we only have about 2 or 3 minutes left before we go back to class. But I'm working on a project. I want to tell you 6 things about this project I'm working on. And if I tell you these 6 things and none of them hit you, we'll never bring it up again. Probably I'll never see you again because we only had 2 more days of classes. He said, but if those 6 things hit you, what I'd like to do is bring my wife. We lived actually in the same town. He said, I'd like to bring my wife over to your place, sit down and share with you this opportunity. It'll take about an hour. I said, sure, go ahead. We had about 2 minutes left. These are the 6 things he said to me. He said, number one, the first thing is if you're ever going to get ahead in this world, you have to be in business for yourself. You have to work for yourself. And I said, man, I know that for sure. My dad told me that from the time I can remember. My dad was brought up in a family-owned business. My grandfather came over to the United States a little after the Civil War, moved to Bangor, Maine, and started a little meatball and spaghetti place. He had a little Italian restaurant. And so my dad was brought up in a business atmosphere. World War II, he went to Europe, came back after World War II, and my grandfather was older, retired, and the business was gone. So my dad had to go to work in a factory, and he worked in a shoe factory, and he hated it. He probably hated it worse than the average person because he knew the difference of being in your own business and now having to work for someone else. So I would sit in the bathroom next to my dad. My dad would shave at night, and I would take this toilet seat and put it down, sit on this toilet, and talk to my dad as he was shaving. And he brainwashed this little 5 or 6 year old boy, Colombo de Salvatore Jr. He looked at me, and his frustration of having to work for someone else came out. He said, Colombo, don't ever work for someone else. Don't ever get a job. Don't ever have a boss. They'll control you your whole life. They'll tell you what time to get up, what time to go to the bathroom, what time to go to eat, what time to go home. And if you're not ready, you're ready to go home and they don't want you to go home, they're going to not let you go because they're your boss. They literally own you. And his frustration brainwashed this little 5, 6, 7 year old kid so that when I was 21, actually, I think I just turned 22 because Karen and I just got married. I called my dad up, and I'd been going to classes at that time, and I was working in a little bar, but I got out of the job in the little bar. I figured I shouldn't be working in a bar if we're going to try to make a marriage work. So I called my dad up. He said, what do you want? I said, do you have a hammer and a saw? And he said, sure. What do you want? I says, I'm going to do what you told me to do. I'm going to start my own business. I said, when I worked in this bar, people would come and say, Colombo, do you know how to fix a broken window? And I go, nope. Do you know anyone? No. Colombo, do you know anyone that can fix a broken step? No. Do you know anyone? And all the time, people were asking me for someone that would help them do a little odd job. So I told my dad, I'm going to come over, I'm going to borrow a hammer, I'm going to borrow a saw, and I'm going in business for myself. I'm going to be the fix-it-up man. So I started doing that, and I did a couple little odd jobs. And then this one guy that I had met in the bar was a drywall contractor, and he said, hey, I haven't seen you in the bar lately. And I says, well, I don't work there anymore. I work for myself. He said, what are you doing? I says, well, I'm doing little odd jobs. He said, you ever done any sheetrocking? And I said, no. He said, do you want to work with me? Now, I didn't realize he was a drunk. He didn't have a license. He needed someone with a car. So I worked with him for a month, and he taught me the sheetrocking business. And it was my money, my car. He never paid me a penny, but I learned how to do drywalling and how to do the finishing and hanging sheetrock. And that was my main profession for many, many years until we actually went diamond in the business, our first platform. So anyway, so I met this perfect stranger He told me that I needed to be in business myself. And by the time I was 22 years old, I started my first business. I had more something than brains. I can't remember what the expression is, but I don't think it's something I can say over the airwaves here. But so we were off and running. So when the gentleman said the first thing is you need to be in business for yourself, I said, yeah, I'm all in there. And then he said, do you realize that 70% of the people would rather work for themselves than work for someone else? He says it's not necessarily because they hate what they're doing, even though some people do. He said, but most people don't work for themselves because they don't have these three things. Number one, they don't know what to do. They might be a doctor, a dentist, a candlestick maker, or they might be a drywall contractor, or a painter, or a teacher, and they have an education on what they do, but they don't have an education on how to run and operate a business. All right, so they don't know what to do. Number two, they don't have the money to start a business. Even back then, it cost you $1 million if you wanted a McDonald's franchise. So $1 million, the average person doesn't have an extra $1 million kicking around. And he said, number three, the reason that people don't start their own business is they can't quit what they're doing to try something that may or may not work. I got this good job, I'm going to quit it and start a business. And if that fails, then I don't have a business or a job. He says, those are the three biggest reasons why people don't work for themselves. He said, how about if I could show you a way that you could start a business? You didn't have to quit your job. You do it on the side. You didn't have to know anything. You're going to have a coach and a mentor that's going to teach you every step along the way, and you don't have to come up with a ton of money. All right. Even today, almost 50 years later, for a couple $1,000s, you can get this thing up and running, or a few $100s, depending on your personal situation. So he had my interest. He had four of the six things he was going to tell me. A chance to start your own business. You don't have to give up what you're doing. You don't have to know anything about business, and you don't have to come up with a ton of money. Then he hit my hot spot. He said, Colombo, how would you like to get paid what you're worth? And I said, man, would I ever. Now, the reason I was excited about getting paid what I was worth is because at the time I was loading trucks at UPS every morning. And this is how it worked. You grab a package off a conveyor belt and you put it in the truck, and it had to be in the right order that the drivers delivered it. All right. I did such a good job. Now, this was back in the 1970s, and they were paying like $11 an hour to do that. And I think minimum wage was like $2 an hour. So I was excited about that job. That got me out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I did such a good job that they rewarded me one day. They said, Colombo, today you get to work and do 2 trucks. So I got twice the work for the same amount of money. I did such a good job that I eventually was loading 5 trucks. So I would take packages and put them into 5 separate trucks. And the guy across the belt from me loaded 1 truck, and he made the same amount of money, $11 an hour. So I did 5 times the amount of work for the same amount of money. And so when this guy says, Colombo, how would you like to get paid what you're worth? I said, man, would I ever. He said, look, and this is how this thing works. If you do a little, you make a little. You do more, you make more. You do a lot, you make a lot. If you do nothing, you make nothing. He says, I told you the first night, if you don't do anything, you don't make anything. He said, you get paid for your performance. And he said, the only caveat there is there's no floors and no ceilings. I said, well, what do you mean by floors or ceilings? He said, if they give you a guaranteed minimum, whether it's minimum wage or you start out at 10,000, 50,000, whatever it is, whatever your floor is, if there's a floor that you can't go below, there's a ceiling that you can't go above. You will one day hit that ceiling and you won't go above it. He said, what we do is we take away the floors. He said, what do you think about these actors and athletes that make millions and millions of dollars? I said, yeah, that's sweet. He said, but they're not guaranteed to ever make a penny. It's all based on their performance. And because there's no floor of what they can make less than, because there's no guarantee, there's no ceiling. And some of them end up, well, you see some of the contracts in today's day and age. I mean, they make some of these football and baseball players are making hundreds of millions of dollars. It's just unbelievable. He said, that's what this deal is here. Point number 5, you get paid what you're worth. And then he came in for a landing. He said, point number 6 is, how would you like to get paid once or do the work once and get paid forever? And I said, man, that sounds great. That's why I was buying apartment houses or old rundown apartment houses, try to fix them up for some kind of residual income from that. And he said, do you know who Stephen King is? Now, everyone on here has probably heard of Stephen King, the author. He wrote Carrie and a lot of other scary movies. I says, yeah, I know Stephen King. I drive by his house because at the time he's living in Bangor, Maine. I says, I drive by his house every morning at about 3:45 on my way to shuffle packages at UPS. Now, we didn't live in the same neighborhood. I just drove through his neighborhood to get to my job. He says, do you know how much money Stephen King makes? Now, remember, this was 1977. I says, I have no idea. He says, Stephen King this year will make $50 million. That's $1 million a week in the 1970s. That was good money. And he said to me, what does Stephen King have to do this week to make that $1 million next week? I said, he has to write a book. And he goes, no. I said, well, they have to turn the book into a movie. He goes, no. He said, the $1 million Stephen King will make next week is from a book he wrote 5 years ago. I said, oh, good point. He said, how would you like to have something that if you do it once and you do it right, it'll pay you forever? And I said, man, that sounds awesome. He said, that's what I want to get together and share with you. And he eventually came down. This was before high tech. High tech was when we went from chalkboards to whiteboards because he came down, brought his little chalkboard in, set it up in my living room, and showed Karen and I the marketing plan for our first platform. So, but those 6 things put us in the looking zone. So I'm looking at my time here, and I'm going to make a couple more quick points, but we were absolutely in the right place at the right time. There's no question. So I want to just, let's see. When I talk about the looking zone, I got a little thing. I didn't want to do a PowerPoint here, but if you take an imaginary 2 lines and draw 2 parallel lines, in between those lines is what we call the looking zone. In our lives, we go in and out of the looking zone, all right? Because if your boss, you went to work today and your boss said, tomorrow we're going to triple your income. If you make 30 grand a year, tomorrow you start off, you're going to make $100,000 a year. You're not necessarily going to be looking, you're going to be excited about making $100,000 a year, especially if you've never made more than 30 grand. Now, it's going to take a while for your lifestyle to catch up with that income, but eventually you'll come back down to the looking zone. So if tomorrow you went to work and your boss said, you know something, Tony, I don't know how this company is ever going to get along without you, but Monday we're going to find out. That's a Big Al quote. All right. If you got laid off tomorrow, you're not in the looking zone, you're in the survivor zone. All right. So you're below the looking zone, but life has ways of changing, and eventually you're in that looking zone. Karen and I were exactly in the perfect spot in that looking zone because we were looking for this opportunity or anything that would get Karen home as a full-time mother. So, and when we try to sit down and find out if people are looking, I like to draw out the Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrant, where on the left side is the business owners, the employees and self-employed. On the right side is the business owners and investors. And the statistics, as many of you know, is if you're on the left side of the cash flow quadrant, 95% of the people are over there and they only make 5% of the income or control 5% of the wealth. On the right side of the cash flow quadrant is 5% of the population, but they control 95% of the wealth. Well, when I saw this, the gentleman that shared it with me showed me that, and I said, I am definitely on the left side of that cash flow quadrant. I wasn't mad that there were people on the other side that made all the money. I was curious, what are they doing that I don't do? Is there anything that I can do that will give me a snowball's chance in a furnace to get over to the right side of that cash flow quadrant? And he had just shown it to me. All right. So little things like that are good examples to kind of spark people into thinking, why would they want to be going from the left side of the cash flow quadrant to the right side? Well, I'm going to make one more point and then I'm going to get off because I don't want to go too long here. We've been in this industry many, many years. We've been through a couple different platforms. Our first platform, I think we called it 1 million SKUs because we had so many products. We had a little catalog that had everything in it under the sun. All right. And we went from that platform to another platform where we had one SKU, we had one product. Right. And I've always had the attitude that I don't care if all we have is peanut butter and potato chips. I can make this thing work because I know people that eat peanut butter, me being one, and I know people that eat potato chips, me being one. And if I run out of those things, the next thing I'm going to do is reorder peanut butter and potato chips. So I was always business focused. And when we got involved in this platform with these products, the fact that we have products that can literally change people's lives is just such a bonus to the whole thing. So I know some people come from the product side, some people come from the business side, and some people come from both sides. But it's exciting to be what I believe is at the right place at the right time. And the last thing I want to say, well, I want to read you something before I get off, but the last thing I want to say is I use a little thing called this business is as easy as ABC 1, 2, 3. The ABC is a very simple little formula I like. A is if you want to succeed, A is where you are right now. You got to do a good self-evaluation in your life. Height, weight, shoe size, age, color, religion, physical, financial, spiritual position. A is where you are. Okay. B is where you want to end up. That's that goal. That's that hot button. That's that passion. For Karen and I, it was getting her home as a full-time mother. All right. C is a vehicle to get you from A to B. It's just that simple. A is where you are, B is where you want to be, and C is a vehicle that gets you from A to B. All right, if you're looking. So the other part is 1, 2, 3. What we do, because I love simplicity, what we do is so simple. Number one, we find people that are looking. Number two, we get them to move a few products, whether it be self-use or to a customer or two. Number three, we share this with someone else. Who do we share it to? Well, I wish I could pinpoint who was out there that was looking, but I can't. So what we decided to do is we're going to share it with everybody, and the people that are looking are going to let us know. And the people that aren't looking, hopefully will see the benefit in using our products. And then who knows, they may be involved with us when they come back into that looking zone. All right. Now, timing is everything. I want to read you, I want to read you a text that I got that we sent out because Karen and I have set a goal that we're going to reach out to X amount of people every day and make contacts. So I was sitting at the airport before we flew home from Las Vegas, and we were eating at Burger King. We just craved a burger. So we were sitting there, and I hadn't reached out to anybody that day because we'd been busy with the function and everything else. So I sat down on my phone and I reached out to somebody that I hadn't talked to since my last conversation with this person was March 4th, 2023. And if you remember, that's about a week after we launched. So I was reaching out to people back then. Here's the text I got back from this person. I'm not going to say their name, that I reached out to about 24 months ago. It said, "Hi, Colombo. It's been a fun ride with you and Karen and Lance and Tracy, but we have decided not to pursue 3. We are at the stage in our lives where we no longer want to pursue network marketing. We wish you and Karen all the best and success in business." That was a text I got 24 months ago. All right. I sent a text from the airport Sunday night. "Hey, Bob." Bob's not his name, but I say, "Hey, Bob, hope you're doing well. We are just about to finish our 2nd year in our new business. We are breaking records and everything is going great. Sure would like to get on a call or a Zoom and catch up. I know things change, and I'm not sure if you might be in the looking zone. Either way, hope all is well." Just shot that off just so I could get a check mark because I made my reach out and contact that day. Here's a text I got the next morning. We flew all night, slept a few hours when we got home. I woke up and here's a text I got the next morning. Hi, Colombo. We have actually been talking about looking into 3. Can we schedule a call next week? Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday evening would work best. Guess what? They found themselves smack dab in the middle of that looking zone, and we're going to get together with them. I've sent them a couple things from the weekend, and we're going to get together with them. So you just never know. And I've got hundreds of people that I share this opportunity with and send text to and audios and videos and everything else. And some of them have ghosted me. They were my best friend 25 years ago. I've been texting them for 10 years. I haven't heard a thing for years. And all of a sudden I keep texting because I just never know the morning they wake up, because everyone's going to wake up some morning and go, you know what? There's got to be a better way. And you know what? We got it. So thanks for letting us share. It's been our pleasure. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
guys.
much. Amazing job. Thank you very much. It was amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, I made some graphics of the looking zone that came into this chat. I don't know if you saw them. Okay. Thank you, everybody.